Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. It is 1:05 p.m. This session is set to go until 2 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. And I believe there is a correction, so I'll pass this to the county manager.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. On the paper copy of your agenda today has a time to begin at 2 in the afternoon, 2 to 3 this briefing. It should be corrected from 1 to 2. And the following briefing has the same issue. That should be from 2 to 3, and I will do the same thing when you open the next briefing. All the proper notification online and everything else, the master calendar reflects this meeting as scheduled. This is just a typographical error they would like to correct for the record.
Mine says 1.
For the Grand Mound?
Oh, Grand Mound, okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so
1 to 2. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board, and the boardroom is Vice Chair Ty Menser, as well as Commissioner Gary Edwards. And we'll be discussing the Grand Mound Subarea Plan briefing today. And so we have staff from Community Planning and Economic Development joining us. So I will pass it on to
Josh.
Great. Hello, I'm Joshua Cummings, the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. We have joining us Maya Teeple online and Andrew Bond next to me here in the room. Maya will be our lead presenter this afternoon. Just recognizing all the hard work that's gone into this over the years. Grand Mound Subarea Plan is sat fallow for many years, but your Planning Commission and your staff have worked hard to provide you some options for decisions to move forward. You will hear from Maya a concept on having the things that are ready to go move forward at a quicker pace this year, and things that may require more consideration to take place at a later date. So that's what we're calling the split pathway. But just wanted to ensure that you knew that we know that there is community input and engagement on these processes, and honoring the board's request to move items along as quickly as possible with as much input from the community as possible continues to be staff's pathway. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Maya if you're ready to go.
Sure am. Thank you, Josh. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning. Today's briefing is an hour-long briefing on the Grand Mound Subarea Plan, and this is a follow-up from the board's last briefing, which was held in May. So it's been a while. I'll recap a couple of things, and then we'll go over some decision points for the Commissioners today. So I will recap what components make up the Grand Mound Subarea Plan project. This is on the official 2022-2023 docket as item CPA 7A. I'll give a summary of our Planning Commission's recommendation, and I'll give an overview of a proposal to move the project forward. As Josh mentioned, we have a proposal to move items that are ready to go forward now this year, and allowing for additional review time for a couple of other items that need that additional review. And the direction we're requesting from the board today, the first is just a confirmation on the split pathway to move forward the items that are ready to go this year. And then a discussion around the external Grand Mound requests and if the board would like to drop any of those from further review. And the board does not need to drop any from further review, but it is for consideration. So a little bit about what is making up the Grand Mound Subarea Plan project. This update has several components. The first and primary piece of this project is to update the Grand Mound Subarea Plan. And Thurston County has three subarea plans, the Rochester, the Nisqually, and the Grand Mound. Rochester was updated a couple of years ago. Grand Mound we've been working on for the last several years, and Nisqually is in progress. And the Grand Mound Subarea Plan was last updated in 1996, so it's very out of date. It's almost 30 years old, and all of the population data, all of the background information is outdated. It pretty much goes through, I think, 2020 or 2025 in the current plan. So it's in desperate need of an update. The second piece of the Grand Mound project is a couple of code amendments. There are two primary code amendments. The first code amendment reviews lot widths and the regulations in the development code associated for that. So for some residential zones that are only found in Grand Mound, we had some landowners that were having trouble developing their lots to their full potential. So part of this project was to review the lot widths and potentially reduce some of those to make it easier for landowners to realize the full potential of their properties. And then the second code amendment is to adopt the Grand Mound Design Guidelines. That is a document that's been in place since the early 90s when the original plan was adopted, but it's always lived outside of our county code. And so by pulling it into the Thurston County Code, we're making it easier and more accessible, not only for county staff, but for the public that live in that area and go through permitting down there. And then the last and probably the biggest and most complex piece of the Grand Mound project are several land use and zoning requests. And some of these requests do request an expansion to the urban growth area for Grand Mound. There are currently 9 in total that are being considered at this stage. 4 of those land use requests are internal to the Grand Mound urban growth area, and then the other 5 requests are all currently external to the Grand Mound urban growth area. And of those 5 external requests, 3 of them request a UGA expansion, 2 are just rural properties that border the UGA boundary. So I'll go over those land use requests a little bit more in depth. I've broken this table up to show the internal requests on the top and the external UGA requests on the bottom. So the 4 internal requests are the Fire District property, the Steelhammer property, the Tribal Trust Lands property, and the Morgan property. All 4 of these properties are requesting to go to arterial commercial, and they're a mix of either residential 4 to 16 per 1 acre or planned industrial currently under their current zoning. So the request is to go to arterial commercial. One of these, at least the Tribal Trust Lands, is just making that consistent with the future plans that the tribe has in that area. That's kind of a county initiated, and then the other 3 are all citizen requested. And so of those 4 on the top of this slide, the Planning Commission recommended a unanimous approval of all of those 4 requests, with the exception of Steelhammer. Steelhammer did still receive a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission, but the vote was 6-2 on that. The other 5, I'm sorry, go a question?
Commissioners, if you look at the packet, you can see you've got the breakdown in the chart and then the map right adjacent to it. So you can see the names of the properties that are listed within the matrix. Staff has done a nice job with that. Sorry, Mike, please continue.
Thanks. And then the bottom table shows the external urban growth area requests. There are 5 of these currently at this stage. And the top 3 requests are all requesting an expansion to the Grand Mound urban growth area. Currently, they're not within the urban growth area. They're requesting that it be expanded. All of these requests have kind of a different request for zoning. So some of these are requesting to go to residential 4 to 16 units per 1 acre. Some are requesting commercial, light industrial, and then rural resource industrial. And the bottom 2 of these requests would just be a change to rural zoning. They're not asking to be included within the urban growth area of Grand Mound. They would just like their zoning changed, but the Black Lake Quarry alternative is also needing a code change in order to accommodate the types of uses they would like under rural resource industrial. And the Planning Commission recommendation on the bottom 5, so the Black Lake Quarry alternative was not reviewed by our Planning Commission. That kind of came in through the public comment period at a later point, and so they elected not to provide a recommendation on that and allow the board to review that more fully. And then the other 4, the Planning Commission did not recommend approval. So there was a recommendation of no change to the land use and no change to the urban growth area boundary. And these were all unanimous with the exception of the Wilmofsky property, which received a 7-2 vote. And the premise for that 7-2 vote, there were a lot of considerations around housing needs. So that's the summary there. And here is a map that Josh was just mentioning that shows all of those land use requests. So the 3 of the 4 internal are located at the very bottom southern end of the urban growth area, and they're all red color now. We have the tribal trust lands is this large red here, Steelhammer, and then the fire district. And then the other internal request is the Morgan Dental, which is just on the perimeter of the northeastern part of the urban growth area. In terms of requests that want to expand the urban growth area, we have Duskin, which is on the eastern border of the urban growth area along Old Highway 99. We have the Black Lake Quarry request, which is on the northwestern border of the urban growth area, and they're requesting to go to light industrial with a UGA expansion. And then the Wilmofsky request is kind of on the center western border of the urban growth area. That is currently rural residential 1 to 5, and they're requesting to go to a higher density residential use, residential 4 to 16 units per 1 acre. And then finally, we have the Jackson property, which is in the northeastern area. It's this dark purple, and they are not requesting to be included in the urban growth area, but they would like to have their zoning changed to rural resource industrial. And that specific request does meet the locational standards for more intensive uses under that zoning district. So that's why they don't need to be included in the UGA for a different type of industrial zoning request. So the process to date, we've been working on this project for a very long time. It was originally docketed in 2017. In 2018 through 2022, we've held 4 open houses over that time. The most recent was in November of 2023, we held an open house with our Planning Commission. So Planning Commission review started, I think there's a typo. Oh, no, 2022 to February of 2023, we had Planning Commission review and recommendation, and I'll go over the recommendation in full here shortly. And then in April of this year, we issued a SEPA determination on the Planning Commission recommendation, and I'll go over a little bit more about why we focused on the Planning Commission recommendation here towards the end of this presentation. In May of this year, we first reviewed the Planning Commission recommendation, and then we started our Urban Growth Management Subcommittee meetings. We had 1 meeting in June of this year, and at that meeting, that group specifically reviews requests to change the UGA boundaries. So the 3 UGA requests went to that group, and that group requested additional information from our housing update as part of the comprehensive plan, and also from the industrial land study. So as soon as we start getting information around those 2 pieces and we have information to bring back to that group, we will go have a second meeting with that subcommittee, and they're responsible for producing a recommendation on UGA amendments that the board will then review and consider.
Sorry, my question list is piling up, and I'm afraid can we ask questions?
Yeah, we can take a break for questions.
Okay, then let's go ahead and address questions. We'll start with Commissioner Edwards, and then we'll move on to Commissioner Menser.
My question is gonna be to Commissioner Menser. Didn't we come to some agreement here last meeting in May?
Yes.
That was going to be my question. I was like,
Okay, I just wanted you to remind me of it. 'Cause
That's on my list. But
Maya, the commissioners want to zoom ahead. Do you have a problem with?
I don't want to necessarily zoom ahead.
No, it's okay.
I was gonna defer that question. I have other questions that were right on topic of where you were at.
Okay,
Okay.
either way is
Okay.
great.
No, I'll just listen to Commissioner Menser's question.
okay, go ahead, Commissioner Menser.
So on the slide with the map, just 1 slide back, I see 4 colors: lavender, purple, red, and brown and tan. I see 5 colors. Can you tell me what those mean?
Yep, so the brown, I'm drawing a blank on the specific density. It's the lower residential density within Grand Mound, and then the tan is 4 to 16 units per 1 acre. The red is all arterial commercial. That's a zone that we only have within our urban growth areas. This lighter purple is light industrial, and this darker purple is planned industrial. And then the very, very dark purple is rural resource industrial, which is a rural zoning.
Okay, dark purple, and I see that's what, the only one there is this proposed Jackson property.
Yes, and they are the only one that is currently requesting that zoning. We don't have a lot of land that is zoned for rural resource industrial in Thurston County currently. I want to say there's somewhere between 300 and 500 acres across the entire county. Andrew might actually know that number off the top of his head. But we do have a couple of other land use requests in the rural area that are requesting that zoning. So it's not new. We have it scattered throughout the county. It's just not common.
What is it again called?
Rural resource industrial.
Okay, and now on the UGM subcommittee, I wanted to point out a couple of things. One, because I was there, obviously I was the county's representative, and so two things. One is, the subcommittee wanted three things, and two of them you've identified, but there's one missing, and it's important because it was kind of our staff that's gonna be carrying that ore, so that you need to make sure you've got it. The Tumwater representative said, is there a way to know the zoning within the UGA, like why isn't it been developed for what it's, you know, if it's zoned residential and housing, why isn't housing going on there? And Caitlin, I believe, was the planner who said, could we get information about that? And she said, yeah, could easily pull some information about that together, which I was kind of surprised by, but she offered and the group seized on it and my motion included it. So that's a third thing that the UGM subcommittee would like to see, is just a little bit of connecting the dots as to the zoning versus the actual property owners and the activity and what's going on. I'm not sure what that'll look like, but I just want to make sure that was out there. And then my question then is, when the UGM subcommittee did not set we weren't exactly sure when all this information was going to be available, so we didn't set a date for a meeting. We actually debated whether to set one or not. We decided not to. But I'm wondering whether some of the requests need some of the information and some need other parts of information. For example, Wimofsky needs the comprehensive plan housing data. Black Lake Quarry needs the industrial land study. So my point is, let's say industrial land study drops next week, housing data is going to take 6 months. Can we go ahead and set a UGM subcommittee meeting to address these, you know, so that they're getting done as fast as they can get done, rather than waiting for all of them to wait until all of that stuff comes in, because they may not be on the same track.
We can certainly consider bringing them individually to the UGM subcommittee. Typically on UGA amendments like this, we should be reviewing them holistically. So all of these things collectively, since they impact each other and they have a cumulative impact, that's a requirement under state law that we look at these things holistically. So the UGM subcommittee might have a position on that, but we can certainly ask. I will say neither the industrial or housing information is ready to go to that subcommittee yet. We kind of expect the industrial lands at least in the fall timeframe, and housing is still up in the air depending on some things with comp plan, and we're working on some of those housing allocations right now. So
yeah, that was, I mean, the reason I kind of brought it up is because that was my sense, is that industrial land study was going to be a lot closer than the housing potentially. So I understand about the holistic review, and we always need to keep that in mind. But since this has kind of moved forward on a holistic path up to this point, and we're going to be breaking things up here, is my understanding, this is another way of trying to, I mean, things have taken so long that we get to a point now where we really need to sort of make choices that are going to bring this to resolution. And if it means having 2 UGM subcommittee meetings, I just want to throw out that idea.
So Maya, I think we can commit as staff, when the industrial land study or housing information comes available, to present the option to the board to engage the UGM, correct?
yes, that's correct.
So you have that commitment.
Maya, you mentioned the holistic review, but does that mean that they have to be done with the process? Can't we consider, even though, as long as we consider, we're still within the guidelines of the requirements of the holistic review, are we? Just, I'm trying to get this figured out, that, so we don't have that delay of waiting. And I want to meet all the requirements so we don't have a challenge.
We can certainly ask the UGM subcommittee if they'd be open to reviewing them one-off. But there are a couple of other components that I'll get to later in the presentation that we are required to look at as a package. So.
I know, but I'm saying we can still look at them even though they're not done. As long as we're considering the holistic portion of it. I don't know, maybe I'm not making sense.
I think that's kind of what we're doing right now. We are in the
Yeah, but-
process of consideration.
So we won't be, I don't wanna get in a pickle, you know, to where we void ourselves because we didn't consider the whole picture. I think we are considering the whole picture. It just isn't completely done. We know what's coming.
I think the difference between consideration and taking action on those either individually versus collectively.
Yes. Any more questions, Commissioner Mintzer, at this point?
I'm gonna stop right now, because those are the ones that were just directly relevant to this slide, so.
And that's a good marker on the why no development yet on the third piece. Thank you for that.
Okay, we can move forward. Thank you.
There's a space.
Great. And yes, thank you, Commissioner Mintzer, for pulling up that third item. I did see that in the notes, but I forgot to include it in this presentation, and that is an important piece that we will bring back. So summarizing the UGM subcommittee, we're hoping that we'll have information to bring back to that group, all of the information that they requested, but certainly some of that information should be ready by later this year, so later 2023. And again, that impacts the 3 UGA amendment requests, which is Deskin, Black Lake Quarry, and the Wilmovsky property. And summarizing the Planning Commission recommendation, they recommended approval on the Grand Mound Subarea plan, the code amendments associated with that plan, and then the 4 internal land use and zoning requests for Steelhammer, Tribal Trust Lands, and the Morgan property, as well as the Fire District. And there was a recommendation of no change for the external land use requests, specifically Jackson, Wilmovsky, Deskin, and the Black Lake Quarry with the UGA expansion. Again, the Planning Commission did not review and provide a recommendation on Black Lake Quarry's alternative, where they're requesting to not amend the UGA and just go to rural resource industrial. And so at this time, we are proposing a split pathway to allow the items that are ready to move forward on the quickest possible pathway and pace. And that is our internal land use requests and also the sub-area plan and the code amendments. That allows for the additional review time that is needed for those 5 external requests. So if the board agrees to a split pathway approach, we would get a good portion of this plan and project done by the end of 2023. The Planning Commission recommendation would move forward as a package, and that would include Grand Mound Subarea plan, the code changes, the 4 land use requests, and some of those land use requests have been waiting for several years. Steelhammer is one of them that has been waiting for, I want to say, close to a decade at this point or longer. So they're not necessarily new. They've been waiting. That the external requests, the 5 land use requests, which includes the 3 that want to amend the UGA, and also the 2 rural requests for the Black Lake alternative and the Jackson property, would continue on a path into 2024 with a final action by the end of 2024. And there's 2 reasons for that primarily. The first is we need to do the UGM subcommittee review, which affects those 3 UGA amendment requests, and that we predict by the end of the year. And the second piece of that is all 5 of those requests will require additional environmental review. It may warrant a mitigated determination of non-significance or an environmental impact statement. We need to do a little bit of background work first, but we heard the board's request. We have a plan to move all 5 of those forward at this time, unless the board would like to drop any, but there's going to be some time and some work that goes into that before the board can make a final decision and action on them. And so just to summarize what that looks like in terms of timing, if the board gives a sign off today to move on a split pathway, I'll immediately submit an AIS to move forward the Planning Commission recommendation package of the sub-area plan, the code changes, and those 4 internal land use requests. That would have a hearing in September, and then a follow-up briefing later in the year with a final action towards the end of the year as part of our 2023 comprehensive plan amendments. The external Grand Mound requests, those 5 land use amendments, would have their UGM Subcommittee meeting later this year. We'd begin working on that environmental review package. We've already done a little bit of preliminary reaching out, seeing if we can use in-house contracting and resources, but more work needs to be done on that. And that environmental review usually takes about a year if we need to do an environmental impact statement. And that would include going out to have a professional services provider do that work, an expert in that area. And then the board would be able to hold a hearing following that environmental review, probably summer or a little bit after that next year, with a final action by the end of next year on those 5 separate requests. So the direction we're looking for from the board today is confirmation on the split pathway that we can move forward those items that are ready to move forward. And again, that doesn't hold up any of the other 5. It just allows us to complete those pieces that are ready to move forward this year. And then the second piece for the board is at this time, we plan on moving forward all 5 of those external requests, but it is up for the board's consideration if you'd like to drop any of those requests from further review. The reason this is a decision point for the board at this point is because it will impact the professional services dollars that are required for environmental review. So we do intend to outsource that to complete it. Narrowing down the requests could narrow the cost a little bit on that environmental review. But if all of them need to be included, we're happy to do that and move forward.
I think that's what we agreed on.
Well, Maya, you'd said something earlier about the SEPA going forward with respect to the planning commissions, and you said you'd say a little bit more about why you framed the SEPA was, and that's where the board kind of weighed in and said, because when we heard that, we were like, well, wait a minute, we want to make sure that everything's moving forward, and we want, you know, whatever, we basically didn't want you to frame the work based on the planning commission recommendation, because that's a recommendation and we have the ultimate authority, and we didn't want any decisions being made along the way that would ultimately delay the board's ability to make decisions up or down. And I thought we settled that.
Yeah,
I think that's what you were alluding to.
We're not gonna, I don't think we're backing off, are we, or removing, or?
This is confirmation.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand that statement
Yeah, I
that
think
you.
you're right. I think you, on the last meeting, you went ahead and include the 5 properties.
Yeah,
They included.
so they can move forward.
So they can move forward, and that was against the recommendation of the planning commission.
Yeah, we knew
decision
that.
was made. I think the decision today is whether you like to approach on the split pathway.
Yeah, no, I'm not even got to that yet. I'm just going, Maya made a statement as she was going through her presentation that the SEPA work that was done in the spring or whatever was based on the planning commission recommendation. And she said, I'll say a little more about why that is later. I made a note because Commissioner Edwards, I don't think Commissioner Mejia was at that meeting. We decided that that was not what we were, we didn't agree with that. And I thought we were all on the same page. So I'm just curious what went forward and then why was that different than what we had decided at our meeting?
Right, and so the SEPA was initially issued before we had ever brought this before the board in May, and we do typically issue our SEPA recommendations on kind of what the Planning Commission has constructed. But issuing that SEPA determination on the Planning Commission recommendation was not to prohibit the board's ability to review the other 5. It was just so that we could for sure have a pathway forward for the items that were ready to move forward this year. We recognized and knew that those other 5 requests were going to require additional environmental review that was probably not going to be complete this year. And since that briefing in May, we have heard that request from the board. We've started talking to Public Works about some internal contracts that we might be able to use. And we've also started the budget request for the professional services dollars that will be needed to complete the environmental review on those other 5 properties. So it wasn't intended to be prohibitive in issuing that SEPA determination on the PC recommendation. It was just in an effort to have an option for the board to move forward those items at this year.
And then another question is on this attachment A, the last thing where it says UGM Subcommittee, late 23 to May 24, environmental review and SEPA. Those aren't sequential, right? Like we're not, We don't need to wait for the UGM meeting to start the environmental review on the other external projects.
Absolutely not. So we've already, like I said, we've already begun discussions around the environmental review internally and with some other internal departments. And we would begin working on that. So if we can do pieces without the professional services dollars, we will begin that work internally. Otherwise, it will be dependent on having the professional services dollars allocated to do that environmental review for those 5 land use requests.
And I think, Maya, you kind of buried it in there a little bit, but when you said we're talking with Public Works, is that in an effort to use their on-call list, so we're not spending a lot of time trying to do an RFP for the professional services?
That's exactly right, Josh. There might be a pathway for us to use that internally, and Jeremy was working on that, and unfortunately, he's not here today. So I'm happy to bring back more information on that if the board wishes, but that's the goal, is to potentially use that as a pathway instead of going out for a full RFP.
This is kind of a callback to the Board of County Commissioners asking CPED to put more money in their budget request for professional services to do just this kind of thing. And so there's like, it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing. We know that we've been asked to do it. It's on our budget requests. We're working to do it efficiently with an on-call list through Public Works. The board's gonna see the budget request that essentially the board asked us to request, so.
And are any of these in that lakeside category where the applicant can help finance the work?
Maya, did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. And so because all of these land use requests were rolled into the Grand Mound project, which is a county initiated project, we're not charging the applicants at this time. So the county will take it on and do it as a holistic review. We're really not looking for site specific information at this time. If we do determine that we need something specific for an individual site request, and it can't be done with the cumulative review of all of these requests together, then we would certainly reach out to the applicant. But at this time, it's kind of a county initiated item, and the county is on the hook for the funding.
I'll just share one more thing. So I thank you, Maya. That's good information. And I'm fine with the split pathway because it seems like it's not delaying anyone. It's just helping things get done. So that's my position on that. And you know, it's unfortunate. It does mean it might take another year anyway, but you know, obviously we've got that limitation, as I understand it, that you haven't used the word comp plan today, but isn't there an element of the comp plan that's involved here that this can only be approved once per year?
That's right. We can only take an action on our comprehensive plan once per year. And so we typically do that in the November and December timeframe. So it'll depend on what other docket items we have going next year and if they're ready to be adopted. But if Grand Mound is really the only comp plan amendment that's ready to go next year, the board has a little bit more flexibility on when that action occurs. But typically, yeah, November, December timeframe.
And even if the board were to approve this internal items and code amendments this year, the remaining items could be prioritized. They'll be on the docket and we could continue to, just like we did say they're the #1 priority this year, we could continue to say those items are the #1 priority for next year.
That's absolutely right. And we'll clarify for the public what that new docket item looks like if we complete the left side of the split pathway this year.
Right. Okay. One other thing I just wanted to share, and I know that at first we were like saying just everything go forward. Just to share this with my seatmates from the UGM Subcommittee. There's there's really 4 because the Black Lake's like an alternative, but there's 5. You know, it seemed like Milwaukee really could potentially benefit from the data we would get on housing. The industrial land study might bear on a couple of them. I guess the discussion we had at the subcommittee was, and that I've had with staff as a follow-up, is that the Deskins proposal seemed like it was going to be difficult to find none of them were going to be approved without this new data. I mean, Planning Commission did what the Planning Commission probably should have done based on the data it had in front of it. I see a pathway I see potentially a pathway if this data supports you know, the need for the industrial zoning and residential zoning. And I don't remember specifics, and I don't want to misspeak, but I remember the Deskins proposal looking much more difficult to get through the criteria, the legal criteria to permit a thumbs up vote from the UGM subcommittee, regardless of what this other stuff says, based on the specifics of that proposal. Again, if the board wants to go with everything, I don't have any problem with it really, but as Maya said, we've got limited dollars, potentially and limited time, and I really want to see the projects that have a chance getting to the finish line as soon as possible. That one seemed like a long shot to me, so, you know, I just wanted to share that to my board in case we wanted to prioritize.
Well, I wanna keep with what we agreed to earlier this year. And what Maya said, we can go to the applicant should we have to go if something comes up that we need to push on something. So that's kind of the way I've been viewing this.
And so to follow on to that, the urban growth rules that are provided to us by the state are pretty prescriptive in expanding the UGA. And so from staff's perspective, it's unclear to us what more information would allow for the Deskins project to move forward. But we're, as said before, we're open to receive, and as the board wishes, proceed with whatever review is possible. If there is information that would help support that using the rules of the state, we are always open to receive. Recognizing that we can provide process, but we cannot commit to outcomes.
Sounds like we're there.
Maya, for the Deskins one, I had a question because I know at one point they wanted to see if, you know, like the UGA expansion was just a part of it, but they're like, how about if we don't do the UGA expansion and we just ask for a rezone? Where did
Yeah,
that conversation land?
and so Deskin's original request, I'll just share the map again really quick. You can see the Deskin property is on the southern portion of Old Highway 99 here, and then the Jackson property is just to the north on the other side of Old Highway 99. Originally, when that request came in, both of those were combined in one request, and so it was kind of a UGA expansion of all of this dark purple and all of this red, both the Deskin and the Jackson request. And I believe it was at some point in, I want to say 2021 or maybe before, slightly before or after that, Jackson came in and said, I don't want the UGA amendment. I don't need that as part of my request. I just want to go to rural resource industrial. And so we split those two components up. However, Deskin still wanted the UGA amendment request because that is the only way to get the arterial commercial zoning. And so in order to apply that zoning on those three parcels that are in his request, he needs the UGA amendment. So that's a little bit of the history. It was originally kind of a bigger area that they wanted to include in the UGA. Half of that broke off. They're just requesting a rural rezone at this point to rural resource industrial. And then the Deskin is still requesting the UGA amendment. You'll also see on this map, the other thing is we have a lot of arterial commercial in our Grand Mound area already. I don't have the numbers on how much of that is built out, but that's one of the predominant zoning districts in that area. So there's not necessarily a need for more, but one of the things that needs to be shown in order to do a UGA amendment like that is that there's an overriding public benefit. So that's a high bar to meet without additional information that shows that we need that additional zoning in that area.
So they can't just remove the UGA expansion and go for a rezone for RRI or an RRC.
They could go for RRI, but that won't meet what they want to do on those properties. The only other commercial zone we have in the rural area of Thurston County, we have RRC, or RCC, which is kind of a landward zone. It's intended to cover places that were of a certain pattern in the 1990s, so we can't always apply that in other areas of the county. And then we have neighborhood convenience commercial in our rural area, which is intended for small properties that are serving local communities, smaller communities. It's really meant to be allotted to like a 1 to 3 acre parcel size, not a 75 acre block. So in order to get the commercial zoning that he desires on that property and the uses that he would like to be allowed to do, arterial commercial is really the ask with the UGA expansion.
And Madam Chair, if I could, what I remember from the subcommittee meeting was really not this map showing all the red. It was really a more blown up map of the Deskins properties. And if I remember right, like a ton of it is wetland or something that really couldn't be developed in the way that it would be zoned. Do you remember, am I remembering that right, or do I have that wrong?
I would have to go back and look at limitations on the property. I do believe there is some prairie and pocket gopher soils, and there is a creek and wetlands on the property, but I'm not sure how much of the property it covers. So there are certainly limitations to development with the critical areas, and I could certainly look into that and bring that information back when we bring back this package for board consideration again.
That was the thing that made me feel like it couldn't get through those legal criteria. You know, I mean, how would you have if most of it can't be developed because of these critical areas, why would it serve an overriding public benefit to expand that much of the UGA? I don't think you could defend that in court. So, and I don't know, that was my recollection, but yeah, I'm happy to hear more information because it's been a few months.
So staff is hearing that the Board of County Commissioners is good with going forward on the split pathway. Is that correct?
Split pathway, yeah.
We got one, Commissioner Edwards, yes?
Yeah.
Commissioner Mejia? So we got 3 yeses on that. And then, you know, just in terms of like foreshadowing into 2024, I think Maya's laid out a really good plan for 2023 and moving the items forward that can move forward. In 2024, I do want to remind the Board of County Commissioners that Grand Mound is a growing and dynamic area, and that as we consider what that area looks like into the future, the Board of County Commissioners should be considering all types of different options. And as we move into the next year, our staff will bring forward some thoughts and ideas on how we can best serve the community and provide options for the Board of County Commissioners. And the county manager and assistant county manager have been versed in some of those potential options, but more to come.
Have you been working with the tribe?
Maya,
You got
did
some
hear the question?
discussions going?
Yes, before Kate left, she was working with the Chehalis tribe, and that's part of where we got the tribal trust lands rezone to more accurately portray what their plans are, their longer term plans for that area. I do see Amy Laudermilk is actually on the call, and she's with the Chehalis tribe as well. So,
Okay. As long as we're communicating with everybody.
Sure.
Thank you.
yep.
Yeah, at our meeting with tribal council, and I suggested Amy attend, and we reached out, and I'm really happy to see her, just so she can track what's going on, because she's a member of the UGM subcommittee. And actually, I think the tribes have gotten an elevated status on that, in that process. So I wanted to make sure that the tribe is tracking so that they can weigh in with their 2 cents, because I think we're supportive at a high level of more housing and industrial zone at least during the discussion we had, but more to come.
Okay. 148. Any other comments, questions before we adjourn? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.